what has happened in the United States, the meeting, almost 3 hours of meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. What is the objectives? What were the objectives of the meeting? From what we've heard from me, from mainstream media or from the alternative media, is that Benjamin Netanyahu wants to limit Iranian missile program. It's not anymore about just nuclear program of Iran. Ballistic missile, together with the support of Iran for Houthis, for Hezbollah and Hamas. The other option would be, if not negotiations, would be a war, because I would assume that Israel is not willing to, in my opinion, to start a war against Iran without the United States. That's why they're doing everything to push the United States into a war with Iran. Then Israel be at the margins of the conflict, to be not much damaged by the war between the two parties. Here is what there yesterday, or the day before, there was an interview the Iranian foreign minister had with Russia Today, and he's describing the current situation and how Iran would react to any sort of aggression on the part of the United States or Israel.
What if they attack, and what if they use aggressive means? What would your retaliatory strategy then be?
We defend ourselves.
How?
You know how.
You would attack the U.S. bases in the Gulf countries?
We would attack U.S. and U.S. assets and facilities, everything they have in our, neighborhood.
You seem almost uncomfortable saying that. Are you?
I am? No, I'm not uncomfortable. The only point is I don't want to, express something.
Yes.
Which I don't like it to happen.
Of course.
I'm a man of diplomacy. I'm a man of dialogue. I'm a man of negotiation, and everybody knows me. I have done it in the past, and I can do it again. I'm not the man of war. Of course, I have a war veteran myself.
Yes.
My country, our armed forces are fully prepared for any eventuality, but my preference is diplomacy.
Yeah, I really felt the same way when I was in Iran, talking with the people, talking with the officials. They are prepared for negotiations and for war. And what is your understanding of what has happened in Washington, and how is that going to influence the Trump's administration and the decision they're gonna? Because it seems yesterday we've learned that they're sending a new aircraft carrier to the region, the second one. What is happening in your opinion?
My impression is that we're seeing Trump's relatively typical negotiating tactics, where he goes with an over-the-top aggressive gambit. But also my very strong impression is that he wants to do everything he can to avoid the war. And I think that by now it's quite obvious that he doesn't want to go to war against Iran, but there's tremendous pressure being put on him to do that. And the pressure is coming from the Israeli side, but we have to remember that what is Israel? Israel is a small nation in the Eastern Mediterranean. The problem is the large voting bloc in the United States, which consists of evangelical Christians and of Zionist Jews, among which are many very wealthy donors who are very influential. And the problem with this is that they have a more complete control of the US Congress than Trump does. So for him, avoiding going to war is a bit of a balancing act. And to the extent that I've paid attention to the American media, they are very much in the warmongering mode, and you have all these foreign policy experts, military experts, who are driving the point relentlessly. What an excellent opportunity this is, like once in a lifetime, once in a millennium opportunity to take down the Iranian regime, and that Trump must do this, that he will, leave great legacy and change in the Middle East, and all these wonderful, wonderful things that are going to happen if he goes to war against Iran. Of course, we can now recognize this for what it is. It's just simply more war propaganda, no different than when they went to war against Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and so forth. There's always a class of people there who wants war. It's the bankers, it's the military-industrial complex, and then, in the case of Iran, there's also all these very passionate Israel supporters among Christian evangelicals and Zionist Jews. So far, Trump has been resisting this. And we know a little something about this because from Arakchi, from some members of Iran's parliament, we know that the negotiations between Iran and the United States are going on, that the relationship between Arakchi and Witkoff are good and positive and cooperative. They don't necessarily tell us everything that they talked about. But what I found interesting is that about a week ago, we had maybe 10 days ago, we had the incident when one Iranian drone apparently made it to within the striking distance of USS Abraham Lincoln. And the drone was only destroyed after they scrambled an F-35 jet to shoot down this drone. I found the whole story very strange, almost like they invented the story. And I think that the point was to convey to the public that US naval assets in the Arabian Sea are very vulnerable to Iranian military assets, that they could get sunk, which is a way of the Trump administration saying, hey, we can go to war against Iran, but then, we could lose an aircraft carrier. And that's like 6,000 sailors that will go to the bottom of the sea. So do we really want to do that? However wonderful you think this opportunity is, we stand to lose a lot, which is true, which is why Trump doesn't want to go to war, because it would be absolute suicide. They may perpetuate these slogans about the greatest fighting force there ever was in the history of the Milky Way galaxy and all this. But, they spent 20 years trying to subdue the Taliban in Afghanistan, and they couldn't. And they spent more than 10 years through the Saudi proxy and directly to try to subdue Ansar Allah in Yemen. And they couldn't. They had to finally, withdraw from the range of Yemeni missiles and sign basically a non-aggression pact with Ansar Allah government. And none of these, neither the Taliban nor the Ansar Allah are even close to what the Iranians can do. And so the whole thing is a really dumb idea. But the pressures bearing down on Trump are real. And how do you deal with these pressures? My impression by now is that the American public is so sick and tired of Israel. There's still many supporters in the United States who, see this period of history as rapture and biblical time, end times, and, the fact that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, they don't care. They think this is all, part of the end times, and so, it is what it is. But I think that the mood against Israel is such that if Trump just simply pushed Benjamin Netanyahu under the bus and Israel with it, that he would win a landslide in 2026 in this year's November midterm elections. I don't know if that would be a bold gamble. That would be a very bold gamble because, the media is still against you. The donors are still going to be against you. The big tech, people like Larry Ellison and all these people are going to be against you. But the ordinary people will be with you. And I think that now with the Epstein files coming out, and this is all very closely intertwined with Israel, with Israeli billionaires, I think people have had enough. And I think that this wave is only growing because there's still a lot of people who, don't get their news from the mainstream, from social media. They get it on mainstream media. And many of them haven't even heard of Jeffrey Epstein because mainstream media won't touch the story. They don't tell the people what's going on. But now it's in Congress. It's being discussed everywhere. I think that this momentum is still gathering, and it'll continue to gather. And Israel will not come out unscathed. It's obvious that Epstein was closely, even if he wasn't Mossad. I don't know if he was Mossad, but I suspect that he, the Rothschild family have maintained their own private intelligence network. He was probably working for them. But then, they're powerful enough that they have cooperation with MI6, with Mossad, with CIA, and so forth. But somehow, a lot of these roads lead to Tel Aviv. And the farther the story unravels, the more obvious it becomes. And so I think that if you choose to placate your donors and these Christian evangelicals, that's one gamble. But if you choose to say, okay, I want peace, I want the negotiations with Iran to go on, I want to come to a constructive agreement with them, and I will not encourage Israel to go to war, and if they do, they're on their own. I think that this would politically be the winning ticket at this moment, and that given time, it's only moving farther in that direction. And I think maybe this is why, Benjamin Netanyahu panicked, because he was supposed to go meet with Trump on the 18th of February. And he brought it forward to a week earlier. So he went to meet him yesterday. I think that's a sign of weakness on the side of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. And I think that Trump's hand is gaining credibility. Now, we can't... Oh, yeah, and then another thing we found out from one of Iranian MPs is that in negotiations with Iran, the Americans were asking for a face saving out. And they were saying, well, if we could bomb 2 or 3 sites in Iran, and then, you respond and you bomb 1 or 2 of ours, then, we can take care of the rest with the public relations. We'll just say wow, that was the most successful operation ever in the history of the world. And, we obliterated Iranian whatever, and now it's all fine. And we move on with the next point of business. But, it seems that the mood has hardened in Iran and that people are not accepting that kind of stuff. But it's also a piece of evidence, again, in favor of the idea that the bombing we had in June was part of this deal. That they said, hey, give us a face saving out. The Iranians said, okay, fine, you bomb 1 or 2 sites, we'll bomb 1 of yours, and we'll call it quits. So that's what they did. This time it doesn't seem that this is the Iranians are going to accept this. And so Trump has to choose. But the choice is becoming so stark because even in the region, the mood against Israel is polarizing. So if you went to war against Iran at this point, you would be antagonizing the whole region practically, apart from Israel and UAE maybe. And you're pushing everybody farther away from yourself and to Iran's side, which means that you might completely erase yourself from that region. You might end up getting completely pushed out and lose all influence in the region. And then it's very unclear what the upside is. What is the upside? There is no upside in fighting for Israel and then, granting them their wishes, because, this thing now where the Benjamin Netanyahu is demanding that Iran limits their missile program to 300-kilometer range so that Iranians would effectively be voluntarily depriving themselves of their strategic deterrent. Of course, they're not going to accept that. And of course, there's going to be no negotiations about this. So it's putting Trump in a position where he cannot, there's no gray area anymore. Either you're on one side or you're the other side. And the additional pressure is coming from the Saudi Arabia, from the Saudis, because the Saudis are feeling themselves pushed into a corner because Israelis, through UAE as a proxy, are kind of moving pieces in place to destabilize Saudi Arabia. So when they take care of Iran, Saudis know that they're next. So Mohammed bin Salman has asked Trump to muzzle UAE and Israelis, to hold them back. And Trump is going to have to choose side. Either you're with Israel and UAE, the two peeps quick forces in that region, or you're with everybody else, which means you make nice with Iran, you make nice with the Saudi, with Iraq, you play a constructive role in Syria, you play a constructive role in Lebanon, with Turkey. These are all very considerable powers. So I think that Trump himself is being pushed farther and farther and farther to the point where the obvious decision is going to be that, okay, Israelis, if you want to go to war against Iran, good luck to you. We're not going to be backing you. And I think that then leads to a certain polarization in the United States, because all these pro-Zionist forces are going to be furious. But I think that the rest of the country is going to approve of his decision, and is going to. So it's like really like a pivot moment, like an inflection point in not only West Asia politics, but also in the American domestic policies.
Alex, when we look at the, mostly the media who tries to be on the side of Israelis, who is on the side of Israelis, and mostly Israelis and the people in the West who wants to support Israel or want to support Israel, they're basically, you see some sort of panic in Israel because of the negotiations. They feel, before the talks, Steve Witkoff goes to Israel, talks with Israelis, and after the talk, even Netanyahu comes to the United States. They don't feel that they're in control of the negotiations. That's why I think they're trying to do everything to see what is happening, what is the current situation with the negotiations. And do you think that on one side, many people would argue that Donald Trump is Netanyahu's puppet? On the other hand, you see this sort of behavior on the part of Israeli, which shows somehow the opposite. They don't trust Donald Trump somehow. What is this, the nature of the relationship between the two?
Well, Israel is such a hot potato in the American politics that you can't come out and say, I disagree with the policies of the state of Israel. I disagree with Benjamin Netanyahu. I do not support Israeli policy towards the Palestinians, Lebanon, Syria, all these seven wars that you cannot criticize them. Otherwise, you're politically dead. The media is on their side. The wealthy political donors are on their side. People who control most of the big tech are on their side. So it's a very, very dangerous gamble. But it seems to me that now you and I have spoken about this for many, many months now. And I've always said, if I were a Zionist, I would not trust Trump. And now if you pay attention to Israeli media scene, and, you can follow some of their podcasts, which are, translated to English and so forth, you see that they're not happy with Trump at all. And, one of the things that happened is that, in anticipation of a renewed war between Iran and Israel, they were demanding again that the United States refurnishes them air defense missiles. And the answer from the American side was, sorry, we can't, because we have depleted our arsenals, and what we have, we need to defend our ships and our bases in the region. So sorry, you're on your own. So that was already a signal that, you're going to have to defend yourself if you choose to go to war. And so there's Trump is not saying Benjamin Netanyahu is wrong. I disagree with his policies, but on the sides, they are gradually withdrawing support. And while this is not obvious to Western audiences, it is obvious to the Israelis. So this is why they are now very unhappy with Trump. They are extremely unhappy with Tom Barak in U.S. envoy in Syria, and they're very, very unhappy about the negotiations between the United States and the Iranians. And so, unfortunately, this is a situation that has been, kind of rigged for destruction for many decades now. I mean, going back to the creation of Israel, which has been and still is a British imperial project. And so let's say that diffusing this and bringing the region to peace is going to be a very long-term process. It's not going to happen overnight. But we definitely see the weakening of Israel's hand. And if Trump manages to avoid going to war on Israel's side now, then I think we're coming to a point where Israel begins to simply wither. And because they killed the two-state solution, they will have to embrace the one-state solution. There will be no other choice. The only danger is, of course, that Israelis might reach for a Samson option. And they might decide, right, okay, we're on our own, which means we fire off our nuclear arsenal on Iran, or maybe Iran and Damascus and Riyadh and everywhere. And I think that this is a real danger, because obviously if these people are capable of genocide, then, what's the limit what's the line that they will not cross? I don't think there is a line that they will not cross. So that's the real danger. And I think that this is something that both the Iranians and the Americans have to be very, very watchful with. And I sometimes wonder, because several months ago we learned that suddenly the Iranians found themselves in possession of all the intelligence about Israeli nuclear program and their launch sites and all of these things. I don't know how they got that information, but it's interesting that they do have it. So maybe at some point the Iranians have to clean this up, and if they do, then hopefully they're going to be successful, because Israel with nuclear arsenal is, I think, the number one biggest danger for humanity in general.